For an accessible version of this presentation, please go to https://bit.ly/capital F, lowercase r, capital J, lowercase I, lowercase m, 2020. That's bit.ly/Father Jim 2020. There is also a QR code on this slide to take you to the presentation.
Hello, everyone. We want to welcome you to this, the third and final webinar in Penn-Del AER's series, Building Resilience, Leading and Learning Our Way Through 2020 and Beyond. I'm Mary Nell McLennan. I'm a member of the Penn-Del AER board, and I'm also the chair of our Leadership Development Committee. It's my pleasure to be your host today. For those of you who may have participated in either or both of our previous sessions, you probably remember that this series came out of our disappointment that we had to cancel our annual AER conference that always happens in April. And we also had to cancel the leadership development event that precedes it. As Rebecca Renshaw earlier mentioned, in previous sessions, those cancellations were big losses for us, both professionally and personally. But on the flip side, we did not cancel our commitment. We canceled the conference. We canceled the leadership event, but we did not cancel our commitment to provide professional development opportunities for our members and for our colleagues. So it was out of the disappointment at the cancellation, but also out of our commitment that this webinar series was born. As we began to develop the webinar series, we listened to our colleagues, we listened to our chapter members, we listened to each other, and we realized that it became really clear that the consequences of COVID-19 have threatened not only our schedules, but also our strength and our health and our well-being as we try to multitask in ways we never anticipated having to do. So with that whack on the side of the head, and based on what we were hearing, as well as what we were experiencing ourselves, we stepped out of our usual leadership lane of trainings that deal with leadership skills and leadership mindsets, leadership strategies. And we decided to address the elephant that entered our rooms when COVID-19 came upon us. That elephant has come to us in many forms, but almost always as a loss of what we knew as normal. And it has brought with it additional stresses and a lot of new uncertainty. So with that in mind, and as our compass, we chose the theme of building resilience and created a series to address it. With the help and encouragement of our friend Kevin O'Connor, we developed this series designed not as a lecture series or a factual presentation, but as a conversation with leaders we trust. We turned then to 3 Penn-Del conference keynote alums, as you would have it, who are also well-respected thought leaders in their respective disciplines. And fortunately, when we approached each one of them about being our guest presenters, they never missed a beat. All 3 of them said, sure, what do you need and when do you need it? So we feel quite fortunate to have had that kind of buy-in and that kind of representation in our content. The first session featured Kevin O'Connor as our guest, and Penn-Del's own Vince McVeigh was the facilitator on a theme called Resilient Tool Belt, the Skill Set and the Mindset. Then on June 3rd, Dr. Amy Armstrong from Virginia Commonwealth University shared her experiences and her appreciative resilience strategies in a conversation titled Hope and Resilience, Leaning into Uncertainty. Now today, in our final episode, Father Jim Warnke, a perennial favorite of Penn-Del conference goers, will have a conversation with Kevin O'Connor, and more importantly, a conversation with you about resilience, using the tools and harnessing the hope. This whole webinar series has been a gift, and it's been a stellar lineup that we're offering to the field without charge, and is part of our commitment to try to help move the professionalism of our profession and to move it forward. All 3 of these webinars will soon be available on the Penn-Del AER website, and we hope that you'll return to these videos when perhaps you need to refresh your perspective, or you need to kickstart a new endeavor, or maybe when you just need a good dose of Kevin or Amy or Jim. Never too much of those. So let me tell you a little bit about the Zoom settings and the CEUs, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kevin and Jim. In your upper right corner, the northeast corner of your screen, if you'll change it to make sure it says speaker view, that will be the best view for this conversation. And about those CEUs, this webinar has been approved by ACV REP, and Penn-Del can provide you a certificate of attendance. That would be the document that you would submit to your employer or to your certifying body. But you must attend the entire session, and following the credits at the end of the full webinar, I'll return to tell you about how to proceed with that certificate, and also to give you the code for the session. There is no opening code, by the way. All right, so again, we're happy you've joined us, and I'm sure you'll be happy you did too after your conversation with Father Jim and Kevin. There'll be plenty of time for Q&A with Jim through the actual webinar, but also we have an open mic opportunity after the formal part of the show, and that'll be after we turn the recording off. So if you want to just hang on and hang out, we'll be happy to have you join us. So now I'll turn it over to Kevin, our facilitator. There you go, Kev.
All right, thanks, Mary-Nell. Hello, everybody. Good evening. We have a real treat tonight. Father Jim is an Episcopalian priest who is a favorite of Penn-Del. He's an Episcopalian priest who studied with the Jesuits at Fordham. I think he met his wife around that time of 40 plus years ago. And somehow he got involved in visual impairment and blindness. So we'll ask him about that. He's got a couple of children, adult children, 2, quote, darling granddaughters. He's also a 4th and a 6th degree black belt. So welcome, Jim, and let's have a little chat between the 2 of us. Are you there, Jim?
I'm trying to be.
There you are. Hi, yeah, you're on. Thanks. And your wife is with you today? We don't have any volume. You need to have, try it again. Yep. Okay. Hello. Just need to go off mute, I think.
Go off mute.
Okay. I think we got it now.
Got it now?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, great. So Jim, I have a personal question for you to start
Yes.
us off. The last time I saw you, we were both presenting at Penn-Del.
Yes, sir.
And if I remember correctly, either privately you told me or in the talk, I had the impression that was going to be your last presentation for some reason.
Well, it was because I had been diagnosed with metastatic melanoma, stage 3, and I was pretty sure I wasn't going to be around to do it again.
Wow. You were facing death.
Yeah, and blessedly, we discovered this week that I'm in full remission.
Really? Wow, congratulations.
Also having had a major coronary, died on the table in the emergency room, and the nice doctors brought me back. So it's been an interesting year, to say the least. So
Wow.
I've been doing a lot of thinking about resilience.
Yeah. I guess God didn't want you yet, huh?
Yeah, I think he looked over the horizon and went, "Oh, no, 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 that boy's not nearly ready yet. No, no,
It's
that's not bread. Put him back in the oven."
I know you have some content for us, so let me turn it over to you for a while. When I come back, I have more questions for you.
Yes, sir. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. In order to lean into the hope that we need to use the tools and the mindsets for resilience, it seems to me we also need to tap into a very old-fashioned virtue, and that's the virtue of courage. In these difficult and dark times, we need to be brave, and we need to access the courage that we all carry within us. Now, courage is not being fearless. Courage is not being without fear. The only people without fear are psychopaths, sociopaths, and some really dumb ones, because there are lots of scary things in the world. But rather, courage is the ability to face the things that frighten us, make us anxious, scare the bejesus out of us, and to cope with them by facing with them and finding creative ways to work them through. It seems to me that courage is the soil in which hope is rooted and through which those roots nourish the tree of resilience, the fruits of which are those tools and mindsets that Kevin spoke of in our first conversation. One of the things that gets in the way of accessing courage when we're frightened or anxious or overwrought is the very normal human responses that we have to being in some kind of physical or emotional danger. The famous fight, flight, or freeze responses. Okay? And they're responses. They happen. They're frequently automatic. And they can be hard to get out of. But in order to access the courage, we need to find ways out of those states into the states that will allow us to be brave and to courageously face the things that are staring us down. To do that, it seems to me there's a process. The first process is to step back from the emotional state, which paradoxically means stepping into the center of it. Like a hurricane, emotions whirl around, but like a hurricane, at the very center of the cyclone, there's sunlight and calm and peace, just like in the eye of the hurricane. So to step back from the emotion, we have to step straight into the eye of our very selves. Put our behinds on the chair, our feet on the floor, take some deep breaths, and allow ourselves to experience what we're experiencing, knowing that we are still ourselves right in the middle of it. Then we need to do kind of a parallel process. We need to go within ourselves to see what's available in terms of that already existing inner resilience and reach out, link up with others who can literally encourage us. So it's an inner process, but it's an interpersonal process as well. We need to talk to a friend, a parent, a colleague, a coworker, a therapist, a clergy person, someone who will listen to us without judging us and someone who will help us to figure out our own deepest thoughts and imaginings. This will empower us to then step up to face whatever it is we need to face, large or small, at this given moment, okay? Facing what frightens us, coping, which is a way of coping with what frightens us, is one of the highest markers for resilience and for measuring like ongoing self-esteem. People who have high self-esteem, their self-esteem is difficult to dislodge, and if it does get dislodged, it's pretty easy to get back on track, are people who face and work through the things that frighten or make them anxious, okay? This is a time of great anxiety. Now, this facing of the fear can be direct or indirect. It can be literal or it can be symbolic in some way, but it's the facing of the fear and the facing of the thing that makes us anxious that helps us to develop resilience, that the fruits of resilience to really blossom and mature and be nourishing for us. And interestingly, the very things that we need to do all by ourselves, we can't do in isolation. So we need that interpersonal contact. I worked with a 10 or 11-year-old visually impaired boy many years ago. He had a degenerative condition that required him to have very frequent eye examinations that required full dilation of both eyes. And he was referred to me because he had begun to experience full-blown panic attacks to the point where the doctors couldn't go ahead with the examinations. And they were considering, much against anybody's desire, sedating him or restraining him. His mom came with him, brought his little sister, and I noticed when they walked into my office waiting room, they were all carrying little karate uniforms. They had all just started taking a karate class a couple of weeks before, and they'd be going from my office directly to their class. Well, I just thought that was very interesting, and I mentioned to the young man that, that I too studied karate, in fact, that I was a sensei. He thought that was very interesting. He was absolutely uninterested and unwilling to discuss anything about the eye exams, the medical situation, and the things that frightened him about it, or the panic attacks. Wouldn't do it. He did, however, allow that because he didn't see much in the class he was in, he could take a little coaching in karate if I was willing to give it to him. I explained to his mother that I was going to do a form of play therapy with him, even though he was an older child than one might ordinarily engage in that way. He came. I had him put on his karate uniform session after session. We only had a few meetings before the next eye exam. And I taught him about the samurai, and he was very interested in to learn how to sit quietly and to hold his hands in a certain position, breathe deeply with his eyes open, and to both relax and become very aware at the same time. We were doing karate. As the examination approached, he had still no interest whatever in talking about any of that stuff. But when I asked him, how do you think you're going to do? He said, I'm going to do fine. And I said, okay. And his mother said, how do you think he's going to do? And I said, he said he's going to do fine. I would trust him. Take him to the exam, call me, let me know what happens. They went to the exam. He insisted on going in his karate uniform. He insisted for the first time that instead of accompanying him into the examining room, his mom wait for him in the waiting room. The doctor came out. He stood up, bowed to the doctor, walked up, climbed on the examining table, sat cross-legged, placed his hands in a meditation position, took a deep breath, opened his eyes, and didn't move until the exam was over. And that was that. He didn't need to understand his fear. He didn't need to figure out where it came from. What he needed to do was to find a way to access his courage, his inherent bravery. And he did through the study we shared of the martial arts. And so he faced his fear very directly by first facing it metaphorically, by having someone to talk to, first his mom and dad, then me, and then by reaching into his creativity and stepping forward with a strategy that he believed would work. And in this case, it really did. By the way, studies of self-esteem and resilience indicate that when you face what's frightening, when you do your best to work it through, whether you're successful or not, or to the degree to which you're successful, actually doesn't matter so much. That you still continue to exhibit the signs of a resilient lifestyle and a resilient personality, as opposed to an avoidant one, which is the opposite of resilience. A New York City therapist once talked with a man who had worked after high school as a laborer on the railroad, saved his money, lived in a small rented room so that he could fulfill his life's dream, which was to become a cook in a five-star restaurant, a chef in a five-star restaurant in New York. He took the course at the Culinary Institute, did really well, got a job at a four-star restaurant in Manhattan, and within a year was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. He hated his job. He hated his work. His sister convinced him to consult the therapist, and one of the first things they found out was, as he stepped into himself as a way of stepping back, was that he didn't actually hate the job. He loved the cooking, he loved the creativity, he loved the people. He hated the pressure. He hated the almost psychotic pace that was required in that kind of a thing. And yet, he didn't want to give up his dream, but he knew if he went back to work, he was going to have a breakdown. Didn't want to take anti-anxiety medication because he thought it wouldn't allow him to function, and he was probably right. So one day he came in and said to the therapist, "Listen, I've got this idea. Don't worry, I'm not going to really do it. Not going to really do it, but I had this fantasy the other day. If I just took a toy gun and robbed a bank, and then sat on the curb, put the gun and the money down, waited for the cops to come, raised my hands, turned myself in, pled guilty, I'd have 3 to 5 years at the state's expense to figure out what I would do next. Maybe take some courses in prison." And he said, "Chuckle, chuckle, laugh, laugh, I'm not really going to do it." And I said, therapist said, "Hey, you wouldn't put a piece of frozen chicken and a raw carrot and a raw potato on a plate and think of it as dinner. You might have to do something." He then went home with a therapeutic assignment that he hated, to look in the want ads for any job that he was qualified for, that he would take, that would pay him almost as much as the nice salary he was making, just in case he had to make a switch. He then came back and said, "I hated that therapeutic assignment. It was stupid. I was sputtering under my breath. And then I saw something in the want ads." And he said, "I found a way to go to prison." He said to his therapist, "You're looking at the brand new head chef at the Manhattan House of Detention in New York City." He loved the work. There was no pressure. Everybody was helpful. The hours were better. All went well. So what is it, I wonder, that's frightening you right now? Because I imagine for almost all of you it's something. What is it that's most challenging? What is it that's causing the fight, flight, or the freeze reactions that you need somehow to work through to access the courage to develop the strategies to lean into the hope, to use the tools of resilience? I don't know what it is, but right now, let's do that stepping back by stepping in, just for a minute or two. Let's put our behinds in the chair and our feet on the floor, take a deep breath, close your eyes if you want to, and consult your imagination. Consult what's really going on. Consult in your mind someone that you might talk to later or that you have already talked to about it, and sift through what might be helpful. Okay? Nice and easy. While you do that, I've got one more really quick little story. Years ago, there was a boy who went to the local swimming pool with his parents in the summertime, and more than anything else in the world, at a certain age, like most boys, wanted to jump off the 10-meter pool. And he was terrified, couldn't get himself to do it, couldn't get himself up the ladder. His mother noted this and finally said to him after a couple of visits, "Hey, I think I can help you if you want me to, but it's really up to you. If you just need to do it all by yourself," because that's the way boys at a certain age are, "go ahead." And he came back to her and said, yeah, can you help me? And she said, "Okay, let's." They walked over to the ladder. She said, "I want you to pay attention to how you feel. Close your eyes. Walk up the stairs of the ladder. until you get to the step where you're so frightened you can't take another step, and then tell me. He did. And she said, now, put your left foot on the next step. Now put your right foot on the next step. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Get down, get out of here. And week after week, they repeated this process. And of course, eventually he got to the top of the ladder and he said, there's no more steps. What do I do? And she said, same thing. Go out to the end of the diving board, hang your toes over the edge. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, come back down. He repeated this process over and over again until finally one day, hanging his toes over the edge, he said, this is stupid. This is boring. He jumped into the water, swam to the side, climbed out, shook himself like a collie, and said, I can't believe I did that. And his mom smiled and said, yeah, quick, go do it again. By the third time she had said, quick, go do it again, he said to her, how many times do I need to do this? And she said, till you can believe it. And so, that's what I have to offer just now. Come back to yourself, come back to the computer, come back to the webinar, knowing that you've also considered some things within yourself that you can use later on, long after we're off this particular event, okay? Because one of the things I know about professionals in the blindness field is that you are creative and that you are courageous and that you help others to be creative and courageous in all your professional life. Okay, Tim?
Thanks, Jim. That was terrific. Appreciate it. And for those of you that are on the webinar, if you want to use the chat box to talk to each other or to just share your own reactions to that, go ahead and do that. If you go to the Q&A function at the bottom, you can put in a question that we'll ask Father Jim a little bit later. So if you put it in the chat box, that's okay. We'll try to keep track of it, but it's easier if you put it in the Q&A box. But it's sometimes fun to just throw things into the chat box so that we can sort of see a stream of things. Thanks, Father Jim. You know, you had talked earlier about the cancer diagnosis.
Yes.
And then you found out that you are in remission from stage 3 cancer.
Yes.
There's only a 4th stage, so this was pretty serious.
Yes, and it had metastasized into brain tumors, we found out before.
What gave you the courage, do you think, when you, what gave you the courage when you found out, when those things started happening to you? What did you do? Well,
what helped me was I discovered, much to my surprise, I'm an Episcopal priest, that the things that I've been teaching and preaching for decades, apparently I actually believe them. Wonder of wonders. And that was real helpful. And the lady sitting next to me. I once said in church, how is Jesus of Nazareth and Marie Warnke the same? Yeah. They both know me top to bottom, front to back. They know all my warts and sins and fails and foibles, and they love me anyway. Yeah. That's, there it is. Your faith and lots of prayer from lots of people who cared about me.
So all of that comes back at that moment.
Yeah.
At those moments. Yeah.
And you discover that in your own body, you're only a passenger. You're not driving.
Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, I've watched these commercials on TV. I'm fighting cancer, and I'm fighting cancer. And I think, I'm sitting in an infusion chair letting somebody hook me up. That's fighting cancer. I'm just sitting here. But using self-hypnosis and meditation to try and invite my body to be as responsive to the medications as they could possibly be.
Oh. Yeah, you studied hypnosis, if I remember correctly.
Studied it, taught it for 30 years.
Oh my God.
Psychotherapists, psychiatrists, pediatricians.
Apparently it works.
You know what? if it's a toolkit, it's a hammer. Yeah. You can do everything from make a building to, open a walnut with it.
Wow. Wow. Well, that's interesting. Is it something that somebody who has not studied it for 30 years can still use?
Oh, yeah, sure. Go online and look for guided meditations about anything, guided hypnosis for pretty much anything you want to work on, and it'll be fine. you know, that's the aspirin of hypnosis.
Yeah.
But there are lots of highly skilled professionals around, you know, real psychotherapists who really know how to do that work. And obviously the prescription drugs work better than the Tylenol, and the, you know, the stuff that's a tailored suit is always better than when you buy off the rack.
A friend of mine is a novelist. She's sold 1.5 million books so far in her lifetime.
And she's a master hypnotist.
She said every time she's writing a book, she gets to about 19,000 words. She said it always happens. And she said, I get depressed, I get angry, I don't want to finish this stupid book. My family knows, she just hit 19,000 words. Was there a time when, during any of this treatment for cancer, that you got really discouraged and you were in a low?
Yes. There were 2 days when I was as depressed as I've ever been in my life. Now, I run what used to be called a dysthymic disorder. That's a chronic low-grade depression. It's like a low-grade fever.
Yep.
You know, you don't need, at least I never needed medication. I needed one, count them, only one shot of bourbon and an hour of jazz, and I would be okay. There were 2 days they were not even back to back. And then there was one time, the last hospitalization I had, the next day I went through the emergency room. Marie said to me, I hope I'm getting this correct, sweetie. She said, you know, I saw something in your eyes the other day that I didn't like.
Oh, wow.
She said, you got to promise me you won't give up. And I said, I promise you I won't give up if you'll promise me that if I get to a point where I have to just give it over, that'll be okay with you.
Oh, wow.
I said, fine.
Yeah.
So
That was the handshake between the two of you then.
Yeah. Yeah.
She was understanding something. It's interesting. She saw something in your eyes. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, duh. Yeah.
I mean, it's very interesting that she's not relying on your word. She's not relying on all this kind of stuff. She noticed this emotional reaction in you.
I married a woman who is as visual as I am auditory. No, I'm not kidding.
Wow. Wow. Now, talk about your blind. Are you blind or are you visually impaired? How do you term it?
I'm legally blind.
Okay.
I've always wanted to be illegally blind in New Jersey. That should be possible, but I haven't figured it out yet. I was born with retinopathy of prematurity, total blindness in the right eye, 20/400 in the left.
Okay.
In my mid-30s, I developed acute close-angle glaucoma, and so now have vision in the left eye only of about, they can't really measure it well, 20/1000 maybe.
Okay.
And I've also had cataract surgery in the sighted eye because I had that to deal with too.
So you know where the computer is today, but you're not able to read it.
I'm hoping I'm looking towards the computer.
Okay. What should all of us deal with blindness and visual impairment at some level, but many of us do not see, many of us see fine. What should we know that we don't know about people who have visual impairments, either the people that have it since birth or the people who are, it's suddenly thrown at them?
Well, first of all, that we're people, okay? You know, we're not our disability. We're people who have the disability, okay? That's the first thing. The second thing is that, I think, give me 5 seconds to think of how to say this. The way we've all been feeling when the COVID virus hit,
Yeah,
is how a newly visually impaired or newly blinded person feels every morning.
oh, tell me some more about that.
The new things that you all have having been to do, we're doing with the computer and all the stuff, right? Hi, you're a school teacher. In 3 days, you're going to do everything online. Go for it, right? Okay, we're having to learn everything new, everything in a way that we, you get to be an adult, you get to be comfortable doing things a certain way. Now all of a sudden it's brand new, things that you couldn't do before. Most people are afraid of public speaking. I'm not.
Yeah.
But what terrified me today was that I couldn't manage the computer and do this with you guys without a sighted guide.
Okay.
And by the way, that's also directly facing the anxiety. Getting the help you need when you need it is an act of independence. not an act of dependence.
Okay. Wow. Um, so when we are dealing with these people, what is the best skill that we can face forward with? What's the best skill that we can step into in order to try to help them understand that we are attempting to understand?
Listen, 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 inquire, inquire, inquire. Those are the things. You can't listen too much. You can't inquire too much. Don't assume you know what's going on with somebody because they're the 43rd blind person you've dealt with this month.
Yeah.
And inquire. When you don't know what's going on, when something is a mystery, inquire. Often they will be able to tell you what's going on, what's hanging them up. Not always, but in that conversation, that can be discovered.
Yeah.
And then the two of you can work together to develop strategies that will help them to live resilient, normal, fulfilled lives like everybody.
How did you turn out to be so normal? I mean, was this good parents or good teachers or luck of the draw? You seem like you're pretty normal. I shouldn't ask.
Okay, which means I put on a pretty good act. The next seminar will be Marie describing that. You know what? I was raised by grandmothers who loved me. My mother died of a brain tumor when I was 6 and she was 26.
Oh.
I wasn't correctly diagnosed until 4th grade. I was placed in a self-contained classroom for visually impaired kids, okay, which we should never do away with because there are some kids who need that as part of their transition. I had good teachers, including a really good tutor who got me through high school and college. My father married her. I would not have finished either of those 2 levels of education without her.
Oh.
And then I married well. And that's I'm not just sucking up to her in hopes for a good dinner. That comes anyway. But Marie is a special ed teacher, and I'm her oldest student. And Marie has assisted me along the way, every step of the way, and not put up with 1 minute worth of crap from me. And that's what you need. She always tells me the truth, and she's always there when I really need her for something. And she's not the only one.
Yeah.
I have an army of friends, Mac McLennan being one of them, and, who just have always been there. So, and I believe, thank you for the compliment, but I believe that normalcy is highly overrated.
Well, yeah, there are times when you're not that normal, right? So, how did your dad take your mother's death?
Very hard. He was depressed for years. He was 26 years old. He had 3 kids. I was visually impaired. My sister Pat was okay, and my sister Diane was developmentally disabled. At age 26, he was living in his mother's house with 3 disabled kids and not knowing what to do with himself. Wow. It was very hard for him. And I think he found my sister's disability easy to deal with, not easy, easier to deal with because it was easy to understand. If I had been totally blind, that might have been easier, but visually impaired.
What was your sister's disability again?
She's developmentally disabled, but we used to call mentally retarded.
Oh yeah, right.
And so it was very hard for him, and therefore it was very hard for me.
Wow.
But God bless grandparents.
Yeah. And was the grandparents from your mom or from?
Both sides. I mean, my maternal grandfather died when I was 6, same year as his daughter.
Oh my
from
God.
lung cancer.
Wow.
But his wife, my Nana Ruth, really was my mom.
Yeah.
And then my father's mother and father were his dad was just wonderful. And again, I'm not ragging on my father in any shape, manner, or form. This guy had it really tough.
Yep.
I hold no grudges. It's, anybody who says it isn't difficult to be the parent of 2 disabled children needs to find somebody's moccasins to walk in for a few steps.
Correct. I want to ask everybody who's listening, think about the people that you serve, both the person who might be visually impaired or blind, as well as the people that live with them. And would you formulate a question for us? It's a good time for us to ask some questions. You can go to the Q&A. You can also go into the chat box as well. We have one that one person said, "You're absolutely amazing." I think she's talking about, oh yeah, it says Father Jim. Yeah, you're absolutely amazing. I'm thrilled that you fought so hard to beat this cancer. You look fantastic, and I see that you haven't lost your sense of humor. We're also thankful to have you as a lifelong friend of Penn-Del and look forward to seeing you again real soon. Thanks for your message and continued good health. That's from Brenda Egan, who's
Brenda, thank you. And that was one of my homes away from home. By the way, fast statement. When I was newly ordained, I had given a sermon, and we were at the, you shake hands with people on the way out. "Oh, Father, that was wonderful. Oh, Father, that was just wonderful." And this one here next to me leans over and whispers in my ear, "Just remember, God's the wonder. You're just the one that's full of it."
Denise asks us, do you feel that you've experienced any type of discrimination as a person with your blindness and visual impairment? If so, what were the circumstances and what impact did it have on you?
Yeah, when I finished social work school, I tried to get a job at an agency where I would be better paid working with kids. And when the director found out I was visually impaired, they weren't even going to interview me. Except I had a friend who had recommended me. He had just started working there. So she interviewed me. It was, she was barely in the room. It was pro forma so that she could say that she had interviewed me. He told me that she had said to him she wasn't going to hire me because a visually impaired person couldn't work with kids. I couldn't sue them because he would have to be the witness and he hadn't finished his first 90 days. They could fire him without cause. It was very distressing. It was very distressing. So I went and made trouble for them with the social work board and with the New York State disability people. The guy said, "You can't win the case. What do you want to do?" I said, my salary back then would have been $14,500. I want to cost them twice that in legal fees over the next year. He said, "Oh, hell, I can do that. I'll bury him in paperwork." She did.
Wow. Wow. So you advocated for yourself.
Yeah. There's nothing that you want to stay away from as much as a really irritated, visually impaired or blind person.
Do you ever find it hard to do your job? Or did you find it hard?
Sorry?
Did you ever find it hard to do your job? Somebody asked.
Yes. I went into private practice as a psychotherapist as quickly as I could. Because first of all, I like working for that boss. And I didn't have endless amounts of paperwork and stuff to do. All of that stuff made me crazy. I couldn't stand working for an agency.
Yeah.
I love being a priest. And I love the kind of work as I do. I'm kind of a helper. I could never be the pastor of a parish. They would crucify me in 2 weeks. I don't have the skills. I don't have any of that stuff. But I can counsel, which is what I do. I also spent 5 years as a high school teacher right out of college in Catholic schools because I was a Roman Catholic then. And I had to find, nobody could help me. I had to find all kinds of adaptations, which I did. But it was hard.
How old were you when you went to the seminary and then became ordained?
I was ordained when I was 49.
Oh,
I didn't go to seminary until my youngest child, Amy, started college. I had only been an Episcopalian about 5 years, and I had wanted to be a Roman Catholic priest early on, but I spent a year in a seminary, which was one of the most wonderful years of my childhood and adolescence, but they asked me to leave because of my visual impairment. I wasn't a good student. I didn't know how to be. Again, I was crushed, but went into teaching and found ways to do it and enjoyed it a lot.
And Episcopalians did not consider your blindness to be a problem.
Who's that? The Episcopalians? Nope. The bishop said, "You've clearly made also I'm my age." He said, "You've made a life, you got a family, you got a practice, you got an income. Yeah. You clearly know how to do this. If you need something from me, tell me what it is and you got it."
Another question, how do you harness the tools of hope on a day filled with stress and a full caseload?
Okay, to avoid breakdowns, take frequent breaks. Get up from your desk, have a cup of beverage, non-alcoholic of your choice, and don't lose your sense of humor.
Hmm.
Don't lose your sense of humor. I think that's very important. And then sometimes the only place in a mental health clinic I could get privacy was to sneak into the bathroom.
Yeah.
Okay, by the way, which when you're adult, people will not bother you if you go to the bathroom. They assume you know what you're doing. And I needed to relieve myself, but it was emotional relief.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rather than anything else.
Thank you. We got another one. I'm working with a family that's been trying to work out services for their deafblind daughter, but services and responses are taking a lot longer due to the COVID-19. How can I encourage hope when they struggle every day with no signs of help?
Help them to understand that this is a marathon, not a sprint.
Mm-hmm.
Take whatever expectations they have of the professionals they are working with and cut them in half. Take whatever time expectations they're told. This should take a month, this should take 3 months, and triple it.
Mm.
Because that's the way it is.
Get their expectations in alignment then.
Right, and also, find ways to, be silly.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I asked this one yet. Holly said, what advice can you give teachers to help us work effectively with families with blindness or visual impairments? Is there something from a receiver point of view when you were a little boy that made a difference in how the teacher worked with you?
Yes. And again, it boils down to the things that I learned from Marie. Listen, 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 inquire, inquire, inquire. Jimmy, you seem to be having trouble with spelling. What do you think that's about?
Okay.
Or, Jimmy, I was told in 4th grade when I wanted more than anything on earth, and my only life plan was to go to West Point. Okay?
Really?
She took me off privately into the coat closet with 2 little chairs and very patiently explained to me that visually impaired men couldn't go into the Army.
Wow. Wow.
And give us guns. And asked me if that made sense, and it kind of did.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ask, inquire, how are you doing? Remember, it's not just the person with the disability that needs to be tended to. You can't do everything for everybody.
Yeah.
But sometimes, the kid will be having a difficulty because mom or dad is overly anxious.
Yeah.
And unless that anxiety is addressed, the kid's kind of not going to get ahead. Okay?
Well, I was struck with that story you told about the little boy that was in martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed to me that you listened to what he wasn't saying and you respected his choice.
Yep.
And you were his advocate. You told the parents or the mom, it's going to be okay. I mean,
okay, because I believed it. If I felt differently, I would have said that.
Yeah.
But this kid told me in a way that made me absolutely believe it. He didn't want to talk about what he was going to do.
Yeah.
Oh, the other thing, he said, I may need to do some special stuff. And I said to his mother, if it's not illegal, immoral, fattening, or physically dangerous, do whatever he asks you.
Wow.
She did.
Well, it strikes me that's a good model for all of us in working with parents.
Yeah.
That we help them trust the children who may know more than they do because they're the ones that are having the problem.
Exactly.
Somebody else asked, how do you apply biblical principles to the people you counsel?
Well, I cherry pick the ones that fit. just like every other preacher. I cherry pick the ones that fit. Yeah. And courage is certainly a biblical value. Yeah. And so that can be important language to use when you're working with people for whom that's their language. Yeah. You wouldn't imagine that you could have a conversation with somebody who only speak Spanish by speaking English. You have to learn some Spanish, you have to get a translator. So listening to the language that people use and trying to talk to them in their own language, even if that language is a special private form of English, that's really helpful.
I usually speak louder and slower in English and expect people to understand. How can I encourage hope in a family when COVID is causing delayed responses from the agencies? It sounds like that's going to be a pattern now. We're hearing that.
It's going to be a pattern. And so I think, sort of a gentle acknowledgement, but a firm acknowledgement of the reality. Like my teacher who said you can't go to West Point because they won't give you a gun. We're in the middle of a pandemic. It's going to be slow. Nobody hired extra staff because we're in a pandemic.
No.
It's going to be slower, and it's a pain in the neck. How can I help you call me if you need to get through the tough times.
We've talked about you encountering discrimination and what you did with that. Do you ever encounter sort of the opposite of that, where people are so nice to you because you're blind? They think you're amazing because you can get up and put your coat on and all that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And some nice group of people did an interview with me. They wanted to know the story of my life. Some blindness group. I can't remember who it was. It's on the internet somewhere. And they asked about this very question, and I said to them, yeah. And I said, what I want for the next generation of kids who are blind and visually impaired, the next generation of adults become blind or visually impaired, and come around, adjust, manage, follow Dean Tuttle's principles, all that sort of stuff. What I want for them, what I want for myself is, Father Jim, you're just extraordinary. Well, if people are being kind,
yeah,
I try never to undercut that.
Yeah.
Okay. I smile and I say thank you.
Yeah.
But what I said to this interviewer was, no, what I've succeeded in doing is living an extraordinarily ordinary life. I want folks, not just in the blind and visual impairment field, but with all disabilities, in the next generations to come, to be thought of as, isn't it wonderful that they're so ordinary? That they're having jobs and families and living ordinary lives and making a living and being stupid and being pissy like, the rest of humanity, right? That I think you have to accept that stuff when it comes. One of the things I discovered was, oh no, if you want people to think you're extraordinary, don't tell them you're visually impaired, tell them you've got cancer. Right, and you're walking, they want to carry you on their back and, offer to buy you lunch. It's just, how do you do it? Well, the alternative is kind of being dead.
Yeah, right. We got one
It's
more.
not a hard choice when you think about it.
We've got one more question and about a 30-second answer, and then I'm going to turn it over to you for another few minutes of your final thoughts. But how do you politely tell parents they're enabling their visually impaired child?
Okay, so all of you know how to be polite. So you don't need me to tell you that. Then comes being as direct as possible. Again, I'm sorry, it's only 30 seconds. Mother wasn't letting her kid go to the camp for the blind in New Jersey when we had one. She was overwrought. I sat her down with her husband, kid out of the room, and I said, we have to explain to your daughter that she can't go to camp because it would make you anxious and you would have a nervous breakdown, and then daddy would have to raise her alone, and that's not a good outcome. She's going to have to give up camp even though it would be good for her because it's going to make you nuts.
Wow. That's pretty direct.
Because that's what's going on, isn't it? No, I didn't say that in the first interview. I had been with her.
Yeah.
Okay. I said, it's perfectly legitimate for a child to have to sacrifice for their mother's mental health.
Wow. Well, we've got about 3.5 minutes. Can you give us 3.5 minutes of your final thoughts on our topic today, which is using the tools, harnessing the hope?
I got one more story. I'm going to have to talk really fast.
You can.
Significantly visually impaired boy, about 12 years old, lives across the street from a schoolyard. Schoolyard cut into the side of a hill. The streets above it is terraced, okay? So between the playground and the street above, there's about a 2-story drop. And there's a chain link fence. And, to go to the candy store, you walk around, out, up to the top, and you go. But when boys reach a certain age, they go inside the fence, holding onto the fence, walking sideways, along the fence, 3 stories up. The only place you can get across the top of the fence is where there's no razor wire, which is this chimney. And you have to climb up the fence, put your hiney on the thing, spin around, and go down. This kid couldn't get himself to do it. I'll spare the details. The punchline is there was this one day, there he was again. He got to the chimney, he couldn't get up. The kids were on the other side teasing him as they always did, and something snapped inside of him. He wasn't going back down. He wouldn't go back, but he couldn't go forward. What was he going to do? He cried. He had a fantasy of a little skeleton hanging in his clothes because he was clearly going to die there, right? Until he noticed he was wearing a maroon baseball cap that his father had given him. His most precious possession. And without consciously thinking, he took off the cap and threw it over the fence. Now he was going. Because he wasn't going to let that get run over by a car. He wasn't going to let some kid walk off with it. So, when you cannot go forward, but you won't go back, you might want to say to yourself, how am I going to throw my hat over the fence this time?
Thank you very much, Jim.
Thank you, and thank you all.
Been delightful. And I'm going to turn it over to Mary Nell now. And Jim, thank you very much. We're supposed to wave, I guess, like this. So
Okay.
An appreciation. Thank you. And thank you, Marie.
You're welcome.
Mary Nell?
All right, I'm here. Thank you very much, both of you. Thank you so much for your time, but even more for your honesty, for your thoughts. Thank you, Jim, for your willingness to share your thoughts and insights. Thanks for reminding us that to step back from our fears, we have to wade in. And I just wrote down, when you can't go forward, but you can't go back, throw your cap across the fence. Thanks a lot for that. Your ideas and your suggestions always inspire us, and I'm certain that what you and Kevin and Amy have shared will help us all find our way through 2020 and beyond. Kevin, we want to thank you for being our facilitator, for being our ringmaster, but also for being such a major player in all 3 webinars. A huge thank you for all the generous time and support you've given us as we've developed this. We couldn't have done it without your encouragement. I also want to thank each of you who joined us today and in any of our previous sessions. We appreciate your thoughtful questions, your responses, not only during the webinar, but some of the things that you've said in the evaluation forms you've provided us, and suggestions for future such endeavors. We appreciate the honesty of everybody as we're really dealing with this elephant in our world now. So we hope, we just hope that this helps us move through 2020 and beyond. I need to explain the CEU process. The webinar, as I said earlier, but for anybody that missed it, the webinar has been approved by ACV REP, and Penn-Del can provide you a certificate of attendance to submit either to your employer or to your certifying body. In order to do that, you had to attend the entire session, and following the credits, which we'll roll in just a minute, I'll come back and explain the process for verification and give you the single code for the session. Before we close with everyone, I want to thank the team that built this series. Our whole resilience, it's been a resilient group, trust me. I got to express my gratitude, my respect, and my affection for all the fellow team members on our Leadership Development Committee. These folks were, just like Jim said, they were courageous and they stepped right into it. They were not buffaloed by the cancellation of our event. And they worked in record time and remarkable teamwork. They rolled up their sleeves, they contributed huge amount of expertise and ideas, and they made this webinar series a reality. So to our dedicated team, I say a sincere thank you. Okay, so as we end this recording of this webinar, 2 reminders. Immediately after the credits, I'll come back and give the code and explain how you'll get your verification certificate. And also, we will have Jim and Kevin will hang out and hang on. So we invite you to hang out and hang on with us to further the conversation after the formal presentation is over. Okay, guys. Houston Control, please roll the credits. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Stay well and remain resilient. Building resilience, leading and learning our way through 2020 and beyond. Penn-Del AER expresses deep appreciation to our guest presenters for their ideas, insights, and resilience. Kevin O'Connor, CSP, Dr. Amy Armstrong, Father Jim Warnke, thanks for being on our team. This webinar was provided by the Penn-Del chapter of AER as part of our annual Leadership Development Series. Webinar Development Team, Chair and Producer, Marianelle McLennan, Chief Encourager, Kevin O'Connor, Content and Talent, Carrie Leaders, Vince McVeigh, Kevin O'Connor, Rebecca Renshaw, Aaron Weaver, Technical Production, Greg Leisure, Doug Williams, Registration, Communication, Brenda Egan, Helene Morano, Publicity and Promotion, Nancy Ashley, Marcy Grayboys, Holly Russell, CEU Certificates, Tessa McCarthy. Penn-Del AER extends a sincere thank you to our friend and collaborator, Kevin O'Connor, for his generous time, ideas, and support. Penn-Del AER thanks our techies, Greg Leisure and Doug Williams and Patton, for their time, resources, and support. Penn-Del AER thanks Brenda Lockery and Debbie Holsoffel for their time and expertise in making our promotional materials accessible. Penn-Del AER would like to extend a special thanks to Icons 8 and the musician Gabriel for the song Belong. A picture of the Penn-Del AER logo.
Oops. Am I supposed to be on?